activation, and discretion warning. This episode contains explicit and graphic descriptions of adult content situations, including sexual assault and rape. Discretionary caution and action is required. This episode is not for children. Please use extreme self-care in listening to this episode and seek immediate help. If you are activated and need help from the National Sexual Assault Telephone Hotline, call 1-800-656-HOPE. That's 1-800-656-4673.
He was like, wait a second, are you telling me that you were possibly raped in college? Have you ever talked about that with anyone else? And his tone made me feel like, oh, this is exactly why I don't say this, because I am not damaged goods. Don't look at me like damaged goods. I'm not damaged goods. So nope. And no, I don't have anything that I need to go back and deal with right now.
Welcome, and thank you for joining me for another episode of Sexual Assault Survivor Stories, the SAS podcast, coming to you from the Podvlog studio in St. George, Utah, and produced by Markel Consulting, LLC. I'm your host, Dave Markel. Hey everybody, I'm glad you're here. This is episode 77. And I want to welcome you back to our regular format. I have a guest joining us this week whose journey to being able to share her harrowing past on this podcast has been filled with a significant amount of therapy and work. Her name is Angela Galbreath, and she's a regular listener to SAS. And when she was ready, she reached out to me by email to ask if I would have her on the show. We had a short phone call to discuss this possibility, and I was readily convinced that you all need to hear Angela's story and learn about her 20-plus year healing journey. This is an inspiring episode, and I'm glad you're here to listen in. Here's Angela. Angela Galbreath, thank you so much for being with us. I am thrilled that you're here.
Hi, Dave Markel.
How are you?
I'm good, thanks.
Angela, I'm going to ask you to give a little bit of information about who you are, what you do, what your educational background is, if you want to go into that, and then how it is that you found the podcast and the reason that you reached out to me.
So to start, my name is Angela. I'm 40 years old. I live in Miami now. I'm originally from Kentucky. I do communications and fundraising for nonprofits that do work in Haiti. So after I graduated from college, I went and lived in Haiti for a number of years and loved it. I got into tourism there in Haiti. There was a time when that was a main focus in the country, was to increase the tourism industry. So had a tour company with some local friends. And then when I left Haiti, I did a master's in tourism and had a baby. And now here I am about 10 years later, living somewhere between Kentucky and Haiti here in Miami.
How long were you in Haiti?
6 years, like solid, and then going back and forth ever since then, several times a year. Wow. When I was there, I worked for a tourism magazine. You know, the government said, oh, we're making tourism a priority now to build up the economy. And they had a very dynamic minister of tourism. And the Ministry of Tourism said, okay, we're going to subsidize an English language magazine. We'll give it out at the airport. So people who are coming with charity, we're going to see if we can convince them to stay and go to the beach or go to a waterfall or for a hike or something, and kind of start showing people more reasons to visit the country. So I was on the team with that English language magazine and had the tour company and felt like, gosh, there's really so much we can do with tourism. I love the idea that borders are things that we create. And I like the idea of people being able to move where they would like to go, where they needed to go, where they wanted to go. Yeah. I felt like there I had kind of reached the point where I didn't know what else to do. I felt like there was a lot of potential, but I wanted to know, what are people doing in other countries? And even, you know, where I'm from in Kentucky, what's happening in rural tourism there? And wanted to kind of spend some time learning. And that was a good thing to do, I felt like, with a very small child. So did the master's while my son was really little.
I'm going to ask you how you found the podcast and the reason that you reached out to me.
I started listening to the podcast because I remembered that I had been raped 20 years ago. And I didn't know that was the word for what had happened to me. I just remembered what had happened. And I was looking for a framework and a vocabulary to understand what had happened to me. What led to me remembering was that, for one, I have a stable life now. And so I'm comfortable and feel that that gives me the space to go places in my mind and in my background that perhaps I wasn't able to go before. Also, for the nonprofits that I do communications and fundraising for, both have a component of female empowerment, and one specifically, one of their focuses is on preventing violence against women and girls. And so as I was reading their materials and looking through them and seeing definitions, and it was all resonating very strongly with me, and have been feeling so strongly about the work that they're doing in that area to prevent violence against women and girls. I was binge watching a show on Apple TV, and one night I got to an episode that had a trigger warning, and I had an intuition about the trigger warning. I thought, I think that's gonna open this door that I've kept closed for a while. I'm not up for that tonight. I'm tired. I had a rough bedtime session with my son. I don't know what's gonna happen to me if I do open that door. I don't think I'm going to watch this episode tonight. And I didn't. And then a few nights later, it was on a weekend. And, I turned on Apple TV, it popped right up. And I felt like, why not? Okay. And I pressed play and I started watching. And the episode contained a depiction of a woman who seemed to freeze with the advances of an older man who was kind of mentoring her and helping her. She started trusting him. You could see from her side there was sort of a fatherly connection with that individual. And then when they were alone, he made sexual advances and she froze. And it goes through sexual acts that are done to her without her participation. After I watched that episode, I went to sleep and I woke up the next day and it was like pings of a phone, kind of. It was like pings in my brain, like a ping of the time in college where I befriended an older gentleman who was in charge of community service at the college. We became good friends. And then one day he invited me to go caving, which was strange, but I trusted this person and we kind of had a wacky friendship as it was. We went caving, we got in the cave, and he said, "Can I kiss you?" I was surprised, felt betrayed, said no. What I had seen on TV pinged that memory. It pinged other subsequent memories that I can talk about in a little bit. And I got to thinking, God, isn't it weird that I've had these situations that were painful, similar to each other and painful, and where I felt powerless around men and where things were done to me against my will, or where I was surprised by someone's intention. I thought, it's so weird that so many of these things have happened to me. There are things in my life that I have wanted and I have gone after. These are not one of them. So how did it? And I Googled, is it common for someone who has been raped to have subsequent similar experiences? And the answer that came back, overwhelmingly lots of pages talking about how common it is that that's actually what the biggest indicator of whether or not someone will experience sexual assault is if they have already experienced it.
Right.
I got out my journal and I wrote down the sexual assault experiences that I have, and I was working backwards in time. And as I worked backwards in time, I came to my sophomore year of college, where it was a time that where I went to high school, I felt very comfortable with my social position. I felt good about who I was and the amount of attention I got, how many friends I had, and stuff like that. My social status was important to me, and I felt satisfied in high school. When I went to college, I found myself in a totally different environment where it was a different set of rules. And I felt that I wasn't able to position myself in the way that I wanted. So I felt insecure, I guess would be the word. I felt insecure. I ran cross country, was an athlete. I was on a team, on the cross country team, loved it. My sophomore year, I started dating a guy who was on the team, who was the fastest. He was the fastest, he was super good looking, and started dating him. About just a couple months in, I realized I'm acting here. For some reason, I'm acting like I'm enjoying this, but it's actually not for me. And we were on our way. I can't remember if it was Valentine's Day or if it was his birthday. In any case, it was a hard day to break up with someone. We were on our way to meet his family to watch an NFL game. And on the way there, in my mind, I'm having all these thoughts. What am I doing here? I don't like this person. I don't know why I'm dating this person. And I was thinking about all these things. He noticed I was quiet, and it just all came spilling out. Just, I'm really sorry. I don't think I want to date anymore. And this must be a surprise to you, but this is how I feel. And I'm so sorry. He was very jilted. I did not proceed to the football game with him. He dropped me off with my sister, who went to college in that town. And then she brought me back to where I went to school later. The reason why I include that in the story is because after I broke up with him and he was very jilted, my whole social scene was the cross country team. We ate together, we hung out together, we worked out for hours, early morning practice, sometimes every day afternoon practice. We did everything together, the whole team. And when he was jilted, I became persona non grata. I was not invited to hang out after practice. I was not welcome at the breakfast, lunch, or dinner table anymore. And I felt totally adrift where I had kind of found my cohort. I was on the outs at a point in my sophomore year. I did work study in the French department, studied French. And there was a new professor that year who was tall and youngish. And a lot of the women in the French department who took class in the French department had a crush on him. We can call him Dr. Faubert. He had a way of speaking that everything sounded like a suggestion. And I, like I said, I had a work study to help pay for school, and I work studied in the French department. So I saw a lot of Dr. Faubert. He was not my supervisor, but I saw a lot of him, and he gave me a lot of attention. He would come and talk to me, joke around with me. I remember feeling that he would talk too close. He would touch me. I didn't invite the touch. I felt uncomfortable. To be honest, Dave, the way I was brought up and to see my space in the world, I could not have even told you at that time that discomfort was what I was feeling. I defined the situation as this person is being kind to me and there's something wrong with me. that I am not able to feel goodness from that attention. I'm the one who's got a problem here, is how I thought about it.
Yeah.
I need to figure out how to accept this attention, because if someone is giving, then it must be good. They know better. This older man knows better. Looking back, I can say, gosh, I remember that I didn't like that. I didn't like him touching my face. I didn't like him flirting. However, at the same time, I felt that his attention raised my social status. I did feel that. I felt that a lot of other women are interested in this person, and he's showing me attention. That made me feel a little bit powerful, I guess. And that's one reason, like I explained, I was feeling insecure. And then felt ousted from my group. I was feeling very lonely. And here's this attention. So I never did anything to shut it down in any way. I just also did nothing to encourage it, I would say. Now, as I explained, he wasn't my direct supervisor. However, at one point, I don't remember the exact reason why he invited me to his place, but it was at night, but not so late at night, maybe like 6 or 7, He invited me to his place, and it had some vague connection either with an assignment or with something having to do with my work study, some very vague connection. When I got to his house, I remember it was right across from the athletic center. He lived in what would be called a tiny house today, I think. I remember I went to the back door and he let me in, and I felt very rigid. I remember that feeling like my back was real stiff and my neck real stiff. I remember sitting on his couch and him commenting on how stiff that I was, how uncomfortable I seemed, how tense I seemed. He offered drinks. I didn't want to drink, but I thought that this was something I should do in order to make this situation better for everyone. It'll be better if I'm less tense, is what I thought. Like, he really wants me to have a drink. I feel very uncomfortable. So I can make, maybe it will help me relax as well. Not relax to please myself, more relax to please him. So I remember there was a drink. I don't remember what it was. But at the time, when I was hanging out with the cross country team on Saturdays, we would have us some drinks. It wasn't that this was the first time I had a drink or anything. We would have multiple drinks. But in this occasion, he made one drink for me. I remember we were talking. I remember feeling very uncomfortable. The reason for me being there became clear because he was getting closer. He was touching my shoulders. I realized, oh, okay, this is why he wanted me to come here, because he is interested in being physical with me. Then I remember him wanting to kiss me and me saying, no, we can't do that. He was married. And I remember stating that reason. We can't do that. You're married. We can't go there. And then I remember when he did kiss me that I felt like, that's it. I've lost. I drew my boundary at kissing, and now I've been kissed. So game over. That's how I felt. I already said no, and it happened anyway. So I've lost. And besides that, if I was going to say that I didn't do anything with this married man, now that's over with because we've kissed. That's something. It's over. I don't remember much after that at all, Dave. Like I said, I remember sitting on the couch. I remember not wanting to be kissed, being kissed, and feeling like, well, that's it. I remember I have a flash of being carried up. There were like these little stairs that went up the side, up to a kind of a loft. I remember being carried up the stairs, and I remember being on my back in the bed. I don't remember barely anything. So I don't know if I was drugged or if I froze or what. I just remember when I did come to, I remember feeling myself, feeling between my legs and thinking and knowing, yes, we've had sex. I don't remember how I knew that. I remember thinking, yes, it happened, and feeling like life is over. Life is over for me. That's how I felt when I realized, yes, sex happened. That, okay, well, game over for me. I don't remember how I got home. I don't remember directly after that at all. I remember not wanting to see him again, seeing him at work study. A few weeks after the incident, he somehow I said yes, I would meet him for lunch at a very busy place, like the cool place to go to lunch on campus. And he was saying how much he loved me. He was so in love with me. And I remember saying, I don't know what you're talking about. You're married. This is not happening. I remember just feeling really bad that this person was so sad that I was not feeling the same way that he was feeling, or that he was saying he was feeling. And I felt ashamed, super ashamed that not only have I done this thing that I didn't want to do, that marks me as possibly a homewrecker, or not only that, but on top of that, I'm making this person feel so bad and so sad. And I didn't mention to anyone what had happened, but others had seen him flirting with me. And I think I probably told my roommate where I was going that night. And I didn't say what happened, but I let the story write itself. And I adopted the story that wrote itself, which was Dr. Faubert had an interest and we got physical a little bit, but I'm not interested. And so it didn't go any further. That's the story I rolled with. And even Dave, sometimes people would bring it up like, oh, but remember when you got with Dr. Faubert or whatever? Inside, it was like something decaying, but outside, I would be like nothing. I remember that I did not think of telling, or if I did, I don't remember. I don't remember thinking of telling anyone seriously about it. I wanted to keep going with my life as it was. I know that I did not want to be seen as a victim or damaged or have something that would turn my life upside down, that I would have to stop and deal with, like try to convince people that this had really happened. Because at that time, there were stories of women at the university who, would say that something had happened. And then the next thing you know, they disappear. They can't finish their year. And I didn't want that to happen. That I didn't want to, quote, fail. I wanted to be successful and keep going. But, looking back, it's like I closed the door on it so that I could go on with my life, when in fact, it really affected every area of my life. So pretty soon after that happened, I developed a really severe eating disorder that I did not have before. Running, I felt it was important to be thin before, but after the rape, I started binge eating and it took over my entire life. It took over all the time in the day, was thinking about food or thinking about purging or the actual acts of purging. And it was so confusing because it was like, why am I doing this? There's no logic here. This doesn't make any sense. I don't want to eat this whole thing, but I am. And, there was like no sense to be had about it. And it, like I said, it consumed all my time and all my headspace. My grades dropped horribly. It was strange because I really enjoy literature, and I had this literature class. So the subject that I took the class as this is one that I'll ace and I'll enjoy. And I failed it and had to drop out of that class. And so I only had 3 classes that semester instead of 4 or even 5. Normally, I would have run distance track in the spring. I started the season and stopped. I just didn't have time because I was either eating or purging. Yeah, and like I said, I didn't know why. I eventually went to see the nurse at the school, told her how I was feeling, and she prescribed an antidepressant. And I took that for a month, and that helped. I kind of remembered how I felt normally. That helped some, and life went on at the university. In my senior year, like I said, before the rape happened, I had been dating somebody. And when I broke up with him is when I felt I was ousted out of my social circle. I felt really bad about what I had, quote, done to him. And my senior year, he didn't talk to me. So, for instance, we would be at cross country because I did keep running cross country, even though I skipped a season of track. At cross country practices, he would literally not look at me or not speak to me if we had a reason to speak. He pretended like I wasn't there, like I didn't exist. And others who felt they needed to be loyal to him did the same. So anyway, my senior year, so this is a few years later, it became clear that he was interested in me again. Dave, it's been a mystery. It had been a mystery for me for years why I became interested in him again, like why I felt I needed redemption from that individual. And it makes so much sense now because looking back, I thought that I could like reset time, like, oh, if I start over with that person and never got ousted from the group, then that horrible thing wouldn't have happened. I wouldn't have been violated. And, like everything's fixed. I could fix it by taking this action. Yeah. It makes sense. God, 20 years later.
Right.
But yeah. Anyway, so I graduated. Now I'll go on to some of the other assaults that happened. So I started dating that guy again. And I was a year older when I graduated. I wanted to go to Haiti. I had studied Francophone literature and was really interested and curious about the history of Haiti. And I wanted to go work in Haiti. So I got a gig teaching English. It was set up through church contacts. The school that I went to had a affiliation with a denomination. And so through contacts through that denomination, they set it up where I could teach English at a university. So I went, and my contact was one person there who I had been emailing with, who was telling me where I would be staying and this is how it's going to work and how many classes you'll be teaching and blah, blah, blah. When I arrived in Port-au-Prince, he wasn't there. He was a priest until like the 3rd night that I was there. And so when he was there, he invited me over for dinner. The priest did, to his place. So this is my 3rd night in country. He was my contact. And I went to his apartment, which was very close to where they had arranged for me to stay. And when I got there, we had dinner. The idea was, let's have dinner and we'll talk about the specifics of which English classes you'll be teaching and all this. Then when I got there, we had dinner. And then at dinner, he touched my arm and said, we're going to sleep together tonight. And I kind of like laughed. Oh, no, actually, we're not. He got super physical and he was chasing me around the apartment. And his wife, it's a denomination that allows priests to marry. His wife and daughters were in Canada at the time. And I barricaded myself in his daughter's room. And he was knocking on the door and talking. And And I spent the night barricaded in his daughter's room because he told me that it was not safe for me to walk back to my place, even though it was very close. In the morning, I left his apartment. I don't remember exactly, but I'm sure that I was polite and accommodating. Okay, bye. I went back to my apartment. A few months later, someone else invited me for dinner at their house. It was friends of friends that had seen out quite often. And he was married and he invited me to have dinner with them at their house. Okay, great. He sent a car to pick me up. I get to the house. Wife is not there. It's only he and I. He wants me to drink wine. I'm not having any wine. Again, physical, chasing me around their house. I hit him. I fought him. I spent the night in a room of his house with the door locked. Looking back on those instances, I wonder if I wasn't putting myself in stories that had a different ending, stories that were similar to what happened when I was raped, but they didn't have the same ending, that I got away. So I'm in this precarious situation, but I get away. But still, being in those situations was really scary.
Angela, I'm just really sorry for the experiences that you've had that even brings us together like this.
I think I need a break.
That's a great idea.
Thanks.
You bet. I'm surprised we didn't take one earlier.
So I wanted to go back to when I first remembered what happened. When I did, it was the middle of a work day. Like I said, I got out my phone, I Googled a couple things. I was writing in the journal and then it hit me. And it took me back to the moment in the morning when I realized that I had been penetrated. I felt like I was shaking. I was sweating and shaking and I was panicking. I was panicking. So I called the hotline. I called the rain hotline. And because I still have a number from where I used to live, it was somebody from up there who answered and they were very helpful. They stayed on the line with me for about an hour. I was shaking, weeping, and just unsure, telling her, I don't know what happened. I only know a little bit. And it was 20 years ago. And the person on the other line told me confidently that that's normal. That's not strange. And it does happen. And I can say I didn't totally believe her, didn't totally believe myself.
Yeah.
But that was a beginning. It was a beginning.
Sure. Yeah.
Right after that call, I called my supervisor. I said, I know that I'm not going to be productive today. I'm going to take the rest of the day off. He said, absolutely, no problem. And I started Googling and searching things and just wanting more information like, is what she told me true? Is that normal? How does that work? I want to know more about how brains work, about how my own brain works. And also, it was devastating and at the same time hopeful because rapidly, like dominoes, all these events in my life, I could see how they lined up and fell one after the other into place. And that clarity brought a feeling of lightness and energy, while at the same time also was devastating. Why is it devastating? I often intellectualize things. And I want to understand exactly, okay, why did that feel so devastating? The answer for me, I think, is because I felt like if my place in this world is a place where people can do whatever they want to me and I have no control, then I don't want to be me or don't want to be in the world. These conditions are unacceptable. And I had no way of seeing how to change them 20 years ago. And now, who I am at 40, I have much more hope about my place in this world and how much power I personally have. And so I think just growing and seeing a different role for women is one of the reasons why now at 40, I remember what happened, because I have a lot more hope for how I can handle it and what it means for me personally.
Yeah.
This thing happened, but it doesn't mean that I'm powerless in this world. It doesn't mean that people can do whatever they want with me. It doesn't mean that at all. Now I know that. At the time, I didn't. So I started Googling stuff, found the SAS podcast, and I started listening. And one of the first episodes I listened to, Dave, was the episode about a woman who accepted a nanny job abroad.
Katie Stewart.
Yeah. Yes. Oh, it was like salve on a wound to hear her story. Painful, and also healing. When she talked about having body flashbacks in the middle of the night and feeling impulses to do things that don't make any sense, like getting dressed in the middle of the night, it made sense to me. Everything she said made perfect sense to me. So I listened to more stories. And I think it was Yuri's story, how she talked about the state of mind she was in when events happened. It helped me remember that, oh yeah, at that time, I was lonely and extremely insecure. Just listening helped me understand and believe that there were things about how the brain works that I didn't know yet about my own brain. It's been very, very hopeful. I've been to therapy like at several different times in my life. Love it. One of the times was when I had first returned from the long stint that I'd lived in Haiti. And I thought, okay, I'm about to be a mom, and I'm also returning to a culture that I haven't lived in 6 years. I should probably just go ahead and sign up for therapy. So I'm so glad I had a great therapist at that time. And I remember her asking me, have you ever been sexually assaulted? This is the visual I have in my brain, is like a tiny mouse, like in a very dark room in the very, very back going, yeah. But what I told her was, some stuff has happened, but I wouldn't call it sexual assault. I remember saying, nah. And she was like, okay. And then the very first time I ever admitted what happened was with a man I was dating. Interestingly enough, after I had my child, and he was someone I knew from high school, like an old friend, right? Already a trusted friend. Now we're going to try dating kind of thing. Anyway, we talked about everything. One night we were talking about past relationships. I said, well, there was this one time in college where I went to my French professor's house and I didn't even drink a full drink and was somehow blackout drunk, and we had sex. So that was weird, and then I was going to go on, and he was like, wait a second. Are you telling me that you were possibly raped in college? Have you ever talked about that with anyone else? And his tone made me feel like, oh, this is exactly why I don't say this, because I am not damaged goods. Don't look at me like damaged goods. I'm not damaged goods. So, nope. And no, I don't have anything that I need to go back and deal with right now. Like, I'm good to go, So I just glazed over it with oh, not any big deal for me. And it was years later now, that the second time I ever told anyone was about a week after I realized what happened. And I went to my regularly scheduled therapy appointment. And she was asking me, because I told her when I restarted therapy that I'm coming because I have these patterns with men. It's strange. I can't make sense of them. And I need help to do something different. But mostly we had been talking about work and parenting and this and that. Anyway, so I came to her for my regularly scheduled appointment after remembering what happened and said, wait, Sophia, I need to tell you something. Something big has changed for me. I remembered something that happened 20 years ago. And after I remembered that, a lot of other things in the past 2 decades made sense to me. And I don't know what to do with them, with this memory, or how to, I think I said, or how to make it go away. Yeah. And she was kind and patient. And I remember telling her, I feel like I'm sitting in a roller coaster. Like when you first get into the car before it takes off, feels like I've gotten in and I put the bar down that's going to keep me seated. But I'm telling the people who are running the roller coaster, wait, I'm not sure. Yeah. I'm not sure I want to go on this trip yet. The trip being looking at what happened, what it means for my life, and healing from it. And she said, okay, that's fine. And it took a couple of weeks before we talked about it again. And I did some journaling during that time, wrote down anything else that I remembered. And weeks later, I said, Sophia, I'd like to tell you what happened. And she said, okay, I'm all ears. And so I told her what had happened. And that was the first time I had said it. After that, right after that, I went for a walk in the sunshine and felt a confidence that I had never felt before, or at least that I had never remembered. Yeah. I remember a couple of days after I told her my story, I was walking to FedEx to ship some stuff. And I just remember as I opened the door to FedEx, I'm me. I'm not afraid. I feel confident walking into FedEx right now. That is new. And I know it's from telling her my story and looking at things in a new light. Now, sometimes it feels heavy when I think about it. And a lot of the heavy comes from wishing that I had done something different. Because, man, I knew women in college who were marching at, there would be a yearly march, Take Back the Night, for women's rights. And I knew women who were so vocal about the place that we should have in this world. And I wished I had been a part of that, But today I am. Right now, I feel like where I'm at in my healing journey is when things come up, such as feeling a super strong sense of shame, I pause and see if this is something that's connected to what happened maybe, and if there's something that I can forgive myself related to that feeling. For example, when I remembered what the back door looked like in his little house, I felt a really strong, it was like tar, like a blanket of tar, like onto me. Because why didn't I just go out the door? It was right there, And I felt so yucky just picturing the door. And so right now where I'm at in my journey is when I remember something like this and a feeling comes, I say, at the time, I didn't know that I could go through that door. I literally had no idea that I could go through that door. And it's wild to say, but I didn't. He was a big man. He was in charge of some of my grades. He was connected to my work. There was leverage there, but mostly that he was a very large person with large arms that were blocking in other words, to leave, I would have had to be extremely impolite and make some kind of scene, which could have possibly provoked adverse consequences for me. He could have spread rumors about me. He could have done a number of things. He could have squashed me in class, embarrassed me in class, or any number of things. So just saying, I did my best in the moment. I did my best. And that's it. And when I say that to myself, things shift around inside and settle in a different place.
Yeah.
That feels good. That feels good. One thing I told my therapist was, God, if this had been my house, and I told you this, Dave, when we spoke on the phone, if this had been my house that had been vandalized or robbed, I know exactly what I would do. I would open all the windows. I would open all the blinds. I would let in the sunlight, let in the air it out, rearrange the furniture, and even maybe do some incense to change the smell in the house, and then start making new memories to reclaim the space. The space is mine. I'm reclaiming it. And I told Sophia, like, I don't know how to do that with my internal space. But what I know now is that it's possible. It is possible to do that with our internal space. When I first told my story to my therapist, that was one of the first times that I experienced a rearranging and a letting of light and air into the space. So I had the idea that it would be good to tell my story in appropriate places because it helps me air it out, helps me remember other parts of it. And maybe what I say will help someone else make sense of what happened to them. Yeah.
Perfect. I don't think I could ask for a better response in terms of the reality of what this platform does for people. So many things go through my mind as I listen to you in terms of understanding and wishing that everybody that listened into this podcast had the same kind of understanding. I know there'll be many who listen to it who aren't trauma-informed, who don't understand the impact of what it means to have your very intimate and personal parts assaulted. And so there's the issue of blame and questioning and doubting and all of that. I think it's very, very brave of you, knowing that that's out there, that you understand the importance of talking about it, not only for yourself, but for those other people. And it makes me want to go back and talk about all of what it means to be trauma-informed and how important that is. What this is what you just said. It's that opportunity to speak, to feel safe and confident, knowing that you are going to be understood and believed, and that you're going to get caring, and that ultimately, like you just said, there will be some growth out of this, because every time you talk about this, it brings up new, what we call in the neuroscience of it, you're talking about explicit memory. You're talking about memories that you know you have. And every time you do that, it has the potential to activate implicit memories, which are memories that are stored in your brain, but you may not have realized that those memories are there until you say something explicitly, declaratively, that activates those memories. And then that's what therapy is all about. It's activating those memories. It's confronting the explicit memories that you know you have and dealing with them. So can I ask you a few questions? Do you feel comfortable maybe answering some questions? Because where I think this took a real interesting spotlight for me was when you said that in high school, you had a place, you felt comfortable. I'm interested in hearing about your relationship with your parents and what that was like. What was your upbringing like?
I grew up in a loving home. I have two siblings who are super cool. I'm the third. I'm the youngest. So I grew up understanding that those around me know more about the world, that they have more answers, I think. I could lean on them to know things.
Yeah.
Now, our house was very religious. We didn't talk about sex at all until after I had had sex with my high school boyfriend. my mom gave me a book that was called The King's Daughter. And the moral of this young adult novel was don't have sex or your life is over. And she gave me a necklace that had a little key on it that I was to give to my husband. Those were the views around sex, was that it was a no-go sin zone, that women are often devious temptresses. And when I was getting the attention from Professor Faubert, from others, I wondered if I was unknowingly unleashing my inner devious temptress. I'm not laughing to make light, but now it's, it just, I can laugh about it now. Let me just say that because I know that's not true.
Yeah.
So, also bodies, I didn't know the right names for my parts or anyone else's parts. So, in fact, it was my high school boyfriend who taught me these things. So knowing that my body was my own, that's something I learned much later in life. Another thing was that when I was in middle school and I started questioning our religion, like the tenets of the religion, and then some members of the family thought that I was going to hell. And at that time, the youth group, the church was like my social circle. And when I started questioning and being authentic about what I believed at that time, that put me in a precarious position with my social network, as well as mostly my mom. She was so worried that maybe I was going to hell, or maybe once saved, always saved. She just wasn't sure. And she was very worried about it. And I felt like me being my authentic self is coming at the price of being cut off from everything. Even so, in high school, it was a really small place. It was a small town in Kentucky. I kept my friends and I ran cross country. They were my crew. I was prom queen. I felt secure and my social standing, I guess. Yeah. Even despite not being sure I was accepted as my authentic self, I was very much accepted as a pretty, compliant thing. Very much rewarded for compliance.
Yeah. And I think that's important. I say this a lot, and I kind of want to emphasize this for the sake of the show. I'm not a therapist. I'm not trying to act as a therapist in providing this platform. But the reason I asked that question, tell us about your upbringing, is because it really adds some context and thought process that you might have been having during those high school years and upbringing years that really put things into perspective for us in terms of that maybe overwhelming shock. And I'm not trying to analyze you. I'm kind of reflecting on what I'm hearing is that when you got to college, you didn't feel that safety and your world was different, but you were already experiencing some of the reflective issues that you were having with your mom and your previous relationships with that boyfriend, and having explored sex already. And now you're in this place that doesn't feel all that safe. And it really puts everything into perspective, I think. And I brought it up because I think there are probably other listeners that were wondering maybe the same thing I was as to where your thought processes were going. And it makes a lot of sense.
Yes. And maybe why I felt like sex could bring the end of the world for me.
Yeah. Absolutely. Mm-hmm. And I think it's interesting too, and you brought this up and alluded to it earlier in our discussion, that we had this talk in our pre-recording telephone conversation about those subsequent situations that you found yourself in terms of being very close to being raped again, already experiencing some level of sexual assault, touching, the kissing, the force, but not the full penetration, and you trying to change the ending. I spoke to you about that in our previous conversation, bringing up Bessel van der Kolk's book, The Body Keeps the Score, and how accurate I felt your analysis was of those subsequent potentially rape situations that were sexually assaultive and dangerous and scary for you, but also giving you an opportunity to rewrite the ending, which is,
Mm-hmm.
I think listeners need to know that that's also a common experience. That instead of feeling more guilt and more shame about why did I put myself in that situation again, understanding what the brain and your mind are doing in conjunction with past experiences. And sometimes we don't have control over that.
Sometimes I wonder, why didn't a light bulb go off when I was in those subsequent situations? Like, why didn't it solve that for my brain? You know,
Yeah.
why didn't it answer that question of, okay, yes, you can get away, issue solved. No, now that I'm saying it out loud, I see that it is multifaceted,
Very much
and
so.
that's just one part of it. So I think knowing that I could get away did probably help my mind get closer to opening the door to the past, while at the same time, it was reinforcing the belief that my place in this world was not one where I had control over my own body completely. Yeah.
Angela, there's some enlightenment there that I think I need to maybe comment on. And that is that I don't look at those situations as you inviting any type of assaultive behavior or voluntarily putting yourself into situations that were potentially dangerous. The mind is very complicated. And when you take in all of your past experiences, the way you were raised, your thought processes, your past fears, your past confidences, there sounds to me to be some element of trust and respect for places of authority and persons of position in your life that you felt some respect for and some level of safety in. And also your whole experience of wanting to learn and understand more about life and loving school and making good grades and all of that, I think play into everything that we do is obviously built on what we've done in the past. But I guess my message here for you and everyone is that it's not a situation where you were recognizing, okay, this could be bad, but I'm going to do it anyway. I don't think
No,
that's
I did not think I was putting myself in danger at all.
right.
I had no inkling of that this might be a bad idea. I thought my contact is inviting me. He's a priest. He's inviting me to dinner to go over what my role here is going to be for the next year.
It makes perfect sense. Yeah.
A perfectly normal invitation to accept.
I've got to go through this because I need to learn more about why I'm here and what I'm going to do. I think that's a really important aspect of this whole thing to point out, because there are going to be naysayers who would be like, well, why'd you put yourself in that situation in the first place? Well, we don't put ourselves in situations. That's putting blame on you when the blame needs to go totally 100% to the offender, to the perpetrator. And that's where I think we live in this rape culture, this mindset that victims have some control over their lives in those regards. Like, what did you expect would happen?
Recently, I was talking to one of my nieces about consent, because after all this came up, I was like, I've got to talk to my nieces. Tried to casually bring up the subject of consent with her. I mentioned that for myself, I've had some experiences where the person, my partner, was asking at every turn, is this okay? Can I do this? How do you feel about this? And how safe and how much more satisfying the whole experience was. And I feel like before, myself years and years ago would have said, that's hokey for someone to do that. And now I feel the complete opposite, that it's the best thing ever. It's the best thing ever when at every single second of an encounter should include consent that can be taken away at any time for any reason. That's it. And if that's not there, then it's not an enjoyable experience. If there's some bit of acquiescence, it's not okay. And we don't have to accept, we don't have to acquiesce or accept to anything we don't want at all. Right. Zero. Right. Yeah. If we don't know if we want it, it's okay to say, I'd like to pause. I may want this in the future, but in this moment, at this second, I need to pause. That's okay. Not saying no forever. It's saying no for now, and that's okay. And then if it does happen, then it's actually going to be good and no regret.
I'm so glad you brought all that up because it is so spot on and needs to be said.
Yes, absolutely. Especially for people who were brought up kind of in an environment like I was, where our power was not implicitly understood. It wasn't implicitly understood that we had the power to say no. I honestly did not know that. I thought it was my duty to make others feel comfortable, period. Yeah. I feel like if we're talking about balancing power between two partners in an encounter, you know, for me, having been brought up the way I was, a power balance comes closer to equal when someone's asking me those things, when I don't have to stop the motion or make an extra effort to stop something. So for me, it's more balanced if someone is asking those things, and me in return, I can also ask them. That's why I like that. And I feel like, I don't know if it's universal, but I kind of suspect that it is, that everything is more holistically satisfying when the power is balanced in those encounters, when it's not anyone being stepped on or pushed over. Everyone is more pleased.
I think that's so spot on. I call it mutual respect.
Yes.
If we would all just respect each other and learn more about each other. And that's what this platform is for, is to talk about these things. I am so grateful for you reaching out to me and wanting to be on this show. It means everything to me and to my audience. And I can tell it's obviously meaning something to you.
It absolutely is, Dave. Thank you. Thank you for making a platform. I know you've had episodes on your show about you can tell your story when you want, if you want, how you want. And it's not that I can tell my story to anyone, but people who are finding your podcast want to hear these stories. They're drawn here because they feel there's something here for them. So it's wonderful. When I said appropriate place to share the story, that's what I meant, a place where people are choosing to hear this kind of story. So thank you. Thank you for making the platform. And I do feel like I could walk into FedEx very confidently right now. I do. Now, that's not to say that later I might have something bubble up that I'm going to journal about. Right in this moment, I feel lighter, and that's it.
Oh, Angela, that feels so comforting on so many levels. For me, first of all, to hear you describe what you just did about this platform, because I knew that, everybody should have this opportunity to tell what their story is when they're ready and how they want to tell it in a safe environment where they're going to be believed, where they're not going to be blamed, and where they have some semblance of recognition that this could help someone else.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, right on. I can't think of anything else. Nothing else is coming up at the moment.
You've done an amazing job, and I can't tell you how much I appreciate your willingness to share your story and to do it in the way that you did it. I know there are going to be people who reach out to me to want to get in touch with you, and we'll move forward from there. But I also feel, and I've said this numerous times to many guests, that I can also see where following up with you in several months into the future, 6 months, 8 months, a year down the road, where we can talk again about where things are with you in your healing process, would be extremely enlightening and helpful.
Thanks. I'd look forward to that.
I love that you said that. Thank you. Also, as you just mentioned, that you could feel like you could walk into FedEx right now. I need to know for my own well-being.
Yes.
How are you going to take care of yourself for the rest of the day? Because you've brought up some very difficult issues from your past. and opened up to us about some memories that have been painful. And you shed some tears even during this telling of your story. And I know that once we stop talking to each other and you go your way and I go mine, that you're going to reflect on all of this.
Yes.
Help me understand how you will consequently take care of yourself for the rest of today and the days that are to come, because all of this will have an impact.
Yes. As soon as we hang up, I'm going to finish my cup of green tea and stay right here. My dog's going to jump up in my lap and I'm going to pet him for a little bit, spend a few moments here. Then I arranged to go to a friend's house and we're getting takeout. And our kids are going to get an hour and a half of unlimited screen time. And we're going to chill and eat takeout and catch up.
Great. Is this someone that knows of your past and you can confide in and get support from?
One of the people who will be there is not someone who knows my story, but who I trust completely. He knows about the priest part, and the others are people that know about the stuff, and they're two women who are, I would say, farther along on their journey of liberation, who I admire and look up to. So looking forward to being around their lightness. They're people that like to laugh a lot, so.
Oh man, laughter is such a healing therapy. I'm so happy to hear that, because I just want you to be surrounded by a support system that, should you have some sort of negative response to this, that they'll recognize, they'll see that, they'll surround you with some caring support and understanding. I'm really happy to hear that that's the situation you're going into for the rest of today. And thank you again so much.
You're welcome.
Bye. That does it for another episode of Sexual Assault Survivor Stories, the SAS podcast. My deep and heartfelt appreciation go out to Angela Galbreath. Angela, you did a fantastic job of sharing your story and letting us all know where you are on your healing journey. Hey, SAS listeners, it would do my heart good if you would take a moment to let me know your thoughts about Angela's painful yet truly inspiring story. Just drop me a quick message at davemarkel@gmail.com. That's DAVEMARKEL@gmail.com. And if you're a victim or survivor of rape or sexual assault, and you feel you're ready to tell your story on SAS, email me and I'll talk to you about the possibility of being a guest. Another big request is that you subscribe to this podcast, leave a rating, and listen in regularly. I have a new episode each week, and I would greatly appreciate you becoming a regular listener. And tell your family, friends, coworkers, acquaintances, and anyone else you can think of to join in with us. Let's keep SAS growing. Please remember to do your part to help bring justice to victims and survivors of rape and sexual assault. You can help in this cause, and a great way to do this is to start by believing. Because we all know someone whose life has been impacted by rape or sexual assault. Want to know more about the Start by Believing campaign? Go to www.startbybelieving.org. We'll see you next week.